So knowing a user's permissions is important when you're writing code. The SharePoint object model does give us a way to elevate runtime permissions via the spsecurity.runWithElevatedPrivileges method. And a lot of times people kind of abuse that. They write code that just always works regardless of the user's permissions. And that can be really good when you require it. But sometimes, people abuse it if they're using it for the only reason for its use is just to skip the work of determining what the user is allowed to see. The spSecurable object abstract base class defines two methods that return information about a user's permissions for a given object. So the first one is what you see here, get user effective permission info, that method. And what that returns is an SP permission info object that contains both the SP base permissions and the role assignments. And so that could be at the web level, the list level, or list item level. And again, it's going to return the SP permission info, which will give you the permissions and the role assignments for that user, whatever level that you specified. There's also a get user effective permissions method that just returns a bit mask of SP base permissions. A user interface should respect security, and users should not see information that they don't have permission to see. And the navigation elements of a user interface should not provide links to items which the user lacks access. What that's called is that art of having things that you don't have access to not show up. That's called security trimming. And most SharePoint navigation elements support a rights mask. And a rights mask consists of one or more SP-based permissions values. So when SharePoint's rendering navigation elements, like a quick launch or top navigation, it's going to look at that rights mask. And if it determines that the user that's logged in doesn't have the right permissions to see that link, then it's not going to show it. So it'll hide the content. You can also use the rights mask attribute in custom action feature elements to get the benefit of this feature. So a good example where you might use that with custom action would be, for example, you create an administration page, and maybe it's an application page that does some type of administrative thing in the site that you don't want users to see unless they're site collection administrators. So you could actually set an attribute in the custom action telling it to only show to site collection administrators or site owners or something like that. So the menu, for example, or the link, whatever it is, if it's something in site settings or like a drop-down menu, it won't even get rendered by SharePoint because of the rights mask attribute in the custom action feature. Also, the Microsoft.SharePoint.WebControls namespace includes an spSecurity trim control. So the spSecurity trim control is just a container control that includes permissions and permission string properties that acts as a rights mask. So that's pretty cool. You can just wrap wrap those tags around whatever you want to be security trimmed, and it'll be security trimmed. So let's say if you have like a bunch of, a div that you want to be security trimmed, you can open it up with the spSecurity trim control, and then you close it with the closing tag for that control, and now that div is now security trimmed. So if somebody doesn't have the right permissions to view that div tag or that div content, then SharePoint won't render it. So next I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. We'll create some code that's going to check a user's permission, and then we'll create a custom action to witness the security trimming with the rights mask. Okay, in this demo we're going to go ahead and we're going to check a user's permissions with the get user effective permission info method. And then we're going to take a look and make sure that we'll check Alice's permissions on the items in the task list. Right now there's only one, so let's go back. Let's go to the task list. We'll notice that there's one and Alice is assigned to it, and we know that from the previous demo that she can pretty much do everything to that except for delete it. And just to recap, if we go to site settings, site permissions, and then look at the exceptions for tasks, we'll see here's the item your new task, which is Alice's, and Alice is part of the task assignee permission level, and then I'm the site collection administrator, so I have full control. But Alice is assigned to the custom permission level we created called task assignee, which will not allow deletions. Okay, so what I want to do is let's go in the tasks list. I'm going to create a new task. This one will just be for myself. Save that off. So we have two tasks now. And then what I want to do is, well, let's comment this out. We don't want to create the permissions. What I want to do is loop through the items in the tasks list. And then I want to, for each one, I want to see if Alice has edit item permissions on each item. So I have a snippet and I put on my clipboard. I'm going to copy this in. So just simply getting the tasks list here, and then I'm getting a handle on Alice right here by calling ensure user, and then I'm iterating through the tasks list and calling get user effective permission info, and then I'm actually calling a this method here as well. Item does user have permissions, which is kind of a shortcut, so we don't need to do like a bit mask compare. We could if we wanted to. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just put a breakpoint here. Well, first of all, let's just run it. And in fact, let's do let's make this a little bit better. So we'll say task title and then we'll just leave that. Yeah, actually, let's do this. Permissions. Okay, so now I'll say item title. Let's make this a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to print out the item title and then does user have permissions. And we're checking for Alice on each one. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to run this. Actually, let me cancel that. I want the console.readline in there so it doesn't close too quickly, so we can see it on the screen. So now we're ready to run this. First task we should see should be the one that we assigned to Alice. Okay, so what's happened here is your new task is the name of the title. That's Alice's task. Permissions, true. That means we're checking for, in the code, we're saying does user have permissions, what user, Alice, and what permission do you want? Well, we want edit list items. And so in this case, yes, Alice has edit list items because it's her task. She can edit it, she can't delete it. But then in my task, Alice does not have any permissions on that because she's in the visitors group. So she doesn't have permissions to edit that item because of the fact that she's in the visitors group. She can't edit anything. But this task, we broke role inheritance and we added special permissions just for Alice to view and update that task. So that's just a nice little summary of how permissions work in SharePoint 2013, especially checking out specific user permissions and how to break role inheritance.